Education Minister, Mrs. Motshekga. She's sharing her thoughts with us about matric results and the state of education, particularly in the basic education environment with us today. And we're addressing yours and the questions of our audience that's here. And just before the break, two questions were raised. Are we promoting quantity over quality, and also this issue around the 30% pass mark? And the Minister began by saying that we're obsessing with this 30%. There's very few people who are actually getting through the system with that low mark. And so, Minister, I'm going to ask, let's just revisit that, because with those two questions combined, my question to you perhaps is, the people that are leaving school today who got their matric certificates, 30% are going to get into university. What is the future for the others? What have they got to look forward to?
Schooling, I mean, if you look international, very few countries will have even 30% of kids that pass their matric going to universities, because we don't teach for universities. University is an academic institution for kids who want to pursue other academic careers. Other young people, even with very good passes, will want to go to schools of technology. So that's another 30%, which makes more than 60% of kids who can either go to university or technology. And other kids will want to pursue other careers, which don't necessarily, maybe are not academic careers or practical careers. And some of the kids don't even, with even A passes, will say, I just want to go and do nursing. And there's nothing wrong with that, this career that they want to pursue. So the higher education system should be differentiated adequately to accommodate kids who don't necessarily want to pursue an academic career, because universities are just about an academic career, and some people may not be wishing post-matric to go to academic careers.
So you say that very few pupils are getting through this 30%. Why do we set it at 30% anyway?
You know, it's been there in the system, and that's why I'm saying one of our biggest critics around the 30%, professor from the Free State, he was the advisor to the two ministers when we still have 25% as a pass rate. He never said a thing. What the previous minister did, he raised the standard from 25% to 30%. And what I'm saying, we've set up a commission. If South Africans feel that because somebody screamed to say, in KZN, for instance, when they had produced 47,000 bachelors, 42,000 diplomas, and only 113 kids passing in C, so it is a big issue. The South Africans say we've set up a commission, but what is quite sad that this gets raised when results are out. There's a commission set, people should make submissions to that commission, which is constituting of experts, is comparing us with the world, because it can't be that anybody screams and say, fire, and we just jump. We have to do things systematically, compare ourselves with the world, and benchmark and say, for kids who are doing 6 subjects, unlike at university where you can even do 4 or even pass at 2 subjects, we should be comparing, because you can go to second year with 3 subjects after you've passed them with 30. In high schools, you have to do 6 subjects in one sitting. We're saying they all must pass at 50. If that's what we say, fine. I don't have a personal interest, but I'm saying it's quite strange that it's raised all the time when there are results, despite the fact that there's a commission that we have set up. What you will expect people with academic skills, let them make submissions to the committee and not scream at the time when we are supposed to be celebrating the child of that Gogo in KZN who scored 7 distinctions, and begin to create an impression that it's not worth it. Gogo will tell you how hard the child worked. Said he never went out to the street. Let's celebrate him. Let's celebrate the excellence that we're getting from the system. Indeed, address the problems that we have.
Is there a way to establish what the average mark of the students is, so that we know, are they passing with an average of 48%? Are they passing with an average of 52%? Is there a way to establish that?
You know, in the past, before this NSC, kids used to pass with an average. To say you have to pass with an, say, 800 is an average, which meant you can pass, take full marks in maths and physical science. Some kids are very good with figures, and fail everything else. You will pass with an average. And we removed averages because, again, they will hide the fact that we want our kids to have skills in other subjects. We want them to have skills in languages. We want them, so we spread out the pass to say you have to pass the minimum of 4 subjects at 50%, so which allows you to then acquire other skills, because the basic education is a general stream. So you shouldn't pass with an average because you can't really score full marks. It's easy to score full marks in maths, physical science, and accounting and get an average and pass quite well. Then hide from the fact that you can't, perhaps your language skills are poor and your social skills are poor. So we've removed averages. And that's why we're saying it's much more harder to pass because we're not using averages.
All right. Okay, let's go back to the floor. Table 14, Gertina van der Merwe.
Morning, Madam Minister. I would like to ask, combine the two questions that I said to you. The one is about teacher training. There is a shortfall nationally for teachers that complete their training every year. How are you going to address that one? And the second one is about two subjects that are taught at school, tourism and hospitality studies, that does not allow a pupil to go to university. How can that be addressed?
Okay.
Teacher training is our greatest concern as the sector, and hence the Minister of Higher Education has started a process of reopening universities, teacher training colleges, but attaching them to universities so that we run away from the old system where we had teacher training colleges independent and the quality is not properly assured. So he's in the process. So we are working very close with higher education to begin to address the threat that we are facing, that we will run short out. I mean, because the majority of our cohorts, the teachers that we have in the system, most of them will be resigning at the same time. So we really are working very close with higher education to address that. We also have quotas of recruiting teachers from outside, whereas our preference will be to train our own kids to be teachers in the country. But there are different systems who are providing lots of bursaries for young people who want to become teachers. Last year I went out in the committees with my officials to go and even recruit young people who have completed matric, who are not at home, who qualify to go to universities, encourage them to take teaching as a profession. So the number, we're working, for instance, with independent schools to help us also to train teachers in service so that they register with universities, they start doing their practicals. So we're quite confident that we will be able to deal with the threat of us really not having adequate teachers for our classrooms. In terms of curriculum, it's going to take me some time. We're doing lots of work with curriculum experts to help us to address different challenges that we currently have in the curriculum. For instance, last year, with experts from your technical high schools, we finalized the technical curriculum. We'll be training teachers this year. We'll be rolling it out in 2015. And systematically, we're looking at different aspects and challenges that continue to exist in the curriculum. We've even set up a curriculum review committee, which on an ongoing basis receives inputs from different education experts or practitioners to help us address some of the ongoing challenges in the curriculum. And I'm sure that will be part of what we are raising. That will be part of the things that the curriculum review committee will be really looking at to make sure that on an ongoing basis, we really don't lose our focus on the things that we need to do around the curriculum, because you're quite correct, it's the engine of the work, and that's the core business that we have as a department. So if there are other views that we have officials here, we can refer them to the curriculum review committee to see what else we need to do in addition to the work that we're currently doing.
Table 13, Charity Mampumulo.
Hi. Good morning to you, Prime Minister. My question to you is, do you think the matric results will have an impact on the upcoming elections at all? That's a good question.
And it is an interesting question because some would say that you're doing a sterling job as Basic Education Minister. But the ANC has had 20 years at this, and are we where we had hoped to be 20 years down the track? And can we trust the ANC with another generation of our children?
You know, I regard, maybe as an education, I regard education as such sacrosanct that you should not necessarily link it up to any ambitions or aspirations of children, because education is of adults. Education is about children, it's about the future, and that's how serious it is. So I'm not saying politics are not serious, but you just don't necessarily link adult careers or ambitions to education. I think it would be wrong morally to even link education to anything around politics. We should treat it as the essential service for any child in the country to receive quality education. So in terms of having impact on elections, I think the voters will decide if indeed they think they can trust this government with the education.
But can they trust you? Are we where you had hoped would be 20 years ago?
We're on the track there. I mean, looking back from where we come from, I was saying yesterday, the cohort that graduated this year, when they entered grade 1, our results were at 54%. Now, 12 years down the line, we're at 78%. I'm not sure what else you could be asking for.
But
because in education, as I say, it's a very slow process. It takes 12 years to get to matric. So it doesn't take a year. It doesn't take 5 years. It's a lifetime process to get where you want to be. So I really will be surprised if South Africans themselves don't appreciate the fact that indeed we're making great strides. What gives me pride as a South African is to see, I mean, I've been a teacher, an African child from a rural KZ and staying with her grandmother, who's a pensioner, and asking him what his career plans are, and he says, I'm going to do actuarial science. When I was at school, I never knew that there was, because it was reserved for whites, I never knew there was a qualification like actuarial sciences. And that for me gives me pleasure. And I think that should encourage South Africans. Those kids, they say, was asking, what do you want to do? I'm going to do chemical engineering. I knew that which African child was going to do chemical engineering 20 years back. It was just not there. And education has opened this horizon for all South African kids to grow this country that belongs to them outside race, class, or anything. And for me, that's the biggest, I think, honor that this government would have given to South Africans, to give every child an opportunity to be what they want to be and be what they can be. And for me, that's the greatest honor, whether they vote the ANC or not, but I'm proud that as a ruling party, we've been able to open those doors for every child in this country.
Okay. You talk about every child. At the beginning, you in your speech, you talked about the challenges that we still face and retention. And, you know, when we're looking at these matric results, it's based on 529,000 students that wrote. We know that about 500,000 have fallen out of the system along the way. So if you add the two together, we're looking at about 1.2 million that should have been writing exams this year at 2012. So 400,000 that passed means actually only 40% of the people that started in grade 1 have managed to get matric. So that's the real pass rate, and that means we've got a 60-odd% failure rate. So that, I think, really is what we need to be addressing. How do we address that 500,000 that have fallen away?
We also have to address in the context of where we came from. You know, 20 years, you can even see that's why we have a problem with infrastructure. Even the planning of the apartheid system, it was 1 high school to 3 primaries, meaning that less than 30% kids were designed by design will go to matric. Less than 30%. What we are saying now, we are at retention of more than 60%. Comparable also to some of the countries. I mean, UK, advanced SCTs, has only retention of 76%. So we should also not overestimate ourselves as South Africans and say we really are this magical. We should aspire for better, but you also have to be realistic about where we come from and what the world does, or where the world stands. As I say, UK has a retention of 76%. We're at 66%. You're quite right. It's not good enough to be at 66%, but we're making progress. From the retentions of less than 30% to be at 60%, I'm not satisfied, but I'm hopeful that we are making progress. Schools are also a manifestation of society. We've got lots of challenges in our communities in terms of youth criminality, in terms of poverty, and all those things mitigate against our ability to retain learners. But there are also things that we're doing in the system through our curriculum improvements to make sure that we can inspire kids, we can retain them, because these repetition rates I was referring to are some of the reasons that, some of the factors that are responsible for dropout rates. And we're paying attention to your repetition rates, to your retention rates, your teenage pregnancy. You saw we were working with Bonang and them to really look at other socio-economic factors which force our kids out of schools. And hence the poor package, your scholar transport, school nutrition, no fees, school uniforms, and those are all the measures that we're putting in place to protect and ensure that our kids don't drop out of school. But it's different factors. Some are educational, some are social, and some are environmental. And that's why we're even working with parents to say, we're together in this thing. Help us to keep our kids at schools. But we're making progress. As I say, from less than 30%, we're above 60%, we're making progress. But surely we're not where we are. And it needs all of us to really work together to make sure that we can protect our kids.
Let me ask you this. It seems that right now you only have one chance to get something that you leave school with, and that's after 12 years. Is there an argument that we have another school leaving certificate that perhaps happened earlier in the system, so that children have at least got something to hold on to, those other 500,000? Could there be another tier, another school certificate that we could be considering?
Actually, that's what I was meant to say today. The 40% we are calculating of matric ignores the fact that we have FET colleges where kids branch off after grade 9 to go and do your N1, N2, N3. So it's not all kids who will pursue your academic stream and go up to matric. Some of the kids go out and take your technical or even your FET schemes. And the Minister of Higher Education, who is responsible for FET colleges, has already been doing lots of work to improve the performance of the FET sector, and he's really making lots of progress. So some of the kids who don't necessarily present themselves for matric are some of the kids who've branched off to go to FET colleges.
All right. Table 6, Pilile Duma.
Good morning, Minister. My question to you is, do you think that by increasing the pass rate of matriculants would improve the quality of matriculants going into tertiary education, not only in South Africa, but also internationally?
Okay. And I think as a rider to that, we have a concerning level of people who are not getting through their degree programs. So that 30% that you talked about that have got their bachelors are struggling at university. So again, that whole quality is coming up again. So address her question, but also that as a backdrop.
I'm not sure, because as if there's some conspiracy to increase the pass rate on my part to say, let's have more kids. It's kids passing. It's them passing what has been said. So I'm not increasing the pass rates. We're putting interventions to ensure that our kids pass. So there's no conspiracy of us.
They're struggling when they get to the next
level. It's a different question, because she's saying by increasing the pass rate, is it going to make them? So as if there's something artificial we're putting in and sending them to universities. What we're saying, our kids are passing matric in big numbers, which means 10 years back, there were those passing with the same standard. We've not changed anything. With the same standard, have increased from 54 to 78. There's nothing new. So the things that they're struggling with were there even 10 years down the line. So we're not increasing the pass rate. More kids are being assisted to pass. So the question you're raising, which you are quite correct, it's about them performing well at universities. And ask any parent that has a child at university. There are also other factors. There are lots of factors. I've had to withdraw my child from residence to say, please come home. You're just becoming too clever and smart all the time. No, honestly, all the time he had this pool stick when he comes and visit home, he's in a hurry. You can see that it's free at last, and maybe we've not prepared our kids adequately for tertiary education. So there are other factors that I think, again, we need to look at. I'm saying there are academic programs, but it's young kids, perhaps he went to university at 18, perhaps he was really too happy to leave home and was free at last and could play pool the whole day and come home visiting in a rush. And you can see that he's not running to a library, but he's rushing elsewhere. So there are also social factors that make it difficult for our kids to progress adequately. It's also, as I say, your life orientation, preparing our kids, not only academically, but socially, for really this independence of universities where you find that there's 200 of you in the classroom, It's like a farmer throwing seed. If it lands on a mountain, it lands on a mountain. There's no one to look after, especially coming from small schools where there's individual attention and they're not able to cope with a new environment where you really have to swim or sink.
Right.
And it's all some of those factors that affect our kids' performance. As I say, as a parent working with university kids, you can know that, you can see that there are social problems with our kids. Which takes me even to, if you look at kids who perform. You know, your kids in township schools, we did a study. And I think because they really have to rely on themselves, rely on just being strong, succeed sometimes more than our kids perhaps who come from small classes where there's been individual attention, so they're not able to cope in a bigger environment where they have to wake themselves up. There's no mom to say it's time. They have to, to take all the decisions on their own. And perhaps they're not ready for those decisions.
Okay, we're going to take another quick break, and then when we come back, we'll continue with your questions at home and also with our audience here. Stay with us.